So let's talk about practical issues. Ties happen when in your set of nearest neighbors you have the same number of votes for two different classes. So in binary classification, this can happen if your k is even, right? So you could have two examples of red and two examples of blue. In binary case, you can just get around that by always using an odd value of k, but this doesn't help you for multi-class. You need to break ties. And for breaking ties, there are several rules. So you can either break it randomly, flip a coin, and then decide based on that. You could use the prior. So if the red and the blue are equally present among your 7 nearest neighbors or 16 nearest neighbors, then you look at which one of them has a higher prior, which is the most frequent class overall. Or you could use a 1 nearest neighbor. That never has a tie. So that's for ties. With nearest neighbors, you have to somehow deal with missing values. So remember, missing values is you've got an attribute and it has values in most of your data, but you get a testing instance, and that testing instance doesn't have an attribute value. So maybe there was a medical test that wasn't run or some observation that wasn't recorded. Missing values are very problematic for nearest neighbors. There is no trick like we had for naive Bayes or for decision tree that helps you deal with missing values. Here you actually have to do something, and what you have to do is you have to fill in the missing value. So you have to impute it, you have to come up with some number to stick into that attribute's value. And the key concern there is you're going to be sticking an arbitrary number. You're basically pulling it out of a hat and sticking it as an attribute value. So you want to do is you want to set it in such a way as to perturb the distances as little as possible. And that's hard to do, but in general, if you are pretty reasonable choices, if you pick the mean, the average value of the attribute across the entire data set, that tends to be near the center. So hopefully it will not affect the distances too much. By the way, the reason you need to do that is if you didn't fill the value, you can't compute the distance. You can't just skip that. You can't skip that term in the distance function. It's not well defined.